Welcome to Hornet Radio and Hornet Media. Here today with me is one of my very good friends, a person I've known, well, it feels like a lifetime. For us two, as you can look at both of us, it probably has been a lifetime. The friendship started back in theater, has continued in a variety of different ways. And Bob's here today because Bob, who has been head of theater arts, head of technical theater when he was there, he became head of the department, then dean of fine arts. Not only has he been a theater person, but he's been a leader for everything. If you go out to Hal Scherbeck Stadium, you're going to see a statue out there of Hal Scherbeck. That was Bob Jensen. If you saw the first day when we all played our first game at Hal Scherbeck Field, we had a party before it. That was Bob Jensen that helped do that. If you were here for the Centennial, which actually in the old days, KBPK streamed it out there. Well, the Centennial happened because of Bob Jensen. I'm not saying that to promote Bob Jensen. I'm saying that to show you the dedication he has had towards Fullerton College. And the beginning of another dedication towards Fullerton College is sitting in your lap. Legends and Legacies that you and another professor, Gary Graves, decided to put together after the Centennial to further the education about Fullerton College, the history of the college, the people of the college, where the college has been, where it is maybe now, and where it may be going. It's the most interesting book you can read. I've had a ball with this book, okay? Bob told me about it. He sent me some preview copies. I read it. I looked at it again the other day. There are more stories than there, Bob. So, I mean, the natural question is, you've already put in your 150 years, because Bob looks good for his age, here at Fullerton College. But I've got to ask why you and Gary decided that we needed to have something on paper, bound, that we can go back. I know why I want one, but why did you two think that this needed to be turned into a book fashion?
Good question, because it's been an on-or-off project since the Centennial. There were so many great stories we assembled as part of the Centennial, so many wonderful photographs that open windows to the past, that we just said, you know what, we started this thing, let's finish this. So this was project number 34 of 35 Centennial projects. So this now 34, I can check off 34.
There you go.
35,
got one to go.
35, we'll keep that one a secret for now. But I think we did it for a couple reasons. One was we wanted to celebrate community and really make people feel like they belong here. Our alums, our community members, our current students and faculty, the retirees, that everyone can come home. I mean, the phrase, once a Hornet, always a Hornet, that Coach Scherbeck coined for us at USC during the Rose Bowl in a national championship game, that may not ring true for everyone, but when you learn the stories of the college, the legends and the legacies that we've inherited, then I think it gives us kind of a grateful position, and also we hope and encouragement, especially the current students, because everyone faces obstacles. That's not unique to today. Pandemics are not unique to today. Mm-hmm. Trying to find a good way to make a living, how to build a family, how to build a life of value and significance. Those are the stories that we wanted to tell. I think we all are fascinated by stories. Entertainment is loaded with them. These stories aren't about that Fullerton College is an incredible place. It's about remarkable people came through here, and we should tell their stories. So I think that's why we did it.
You know, the way you set up the book, and you and I were talking before we went on the air, I found real fascinating, because you talk about people who have worked here, who have gone to school here, who have touched the school in some way or form. But you talked about everything around the school. You know, I mean, 1907 is when state of California decided to start community college on the assistance of people at Fullerton High School. So you said you did that, but it wasn't, okay, I'm going to tell you how the college starts. You looked at me and said, this was the time. Why did you and Gary break it down where you had to put history of the school, history of a person, sort of all rolled together like a meatball?
Well, remember again, a lot of people contributed to this book, and one of the biggest visual contributions as well as storytelling contributions was the exhibition we did at the Fullerton Museum Center in 2013 for, I think it was 4 or 5 months. And our curators and our graphic designers put together not just didactic panels, but an exhibit that I think took us into asking the question, what was it like then?
Okay.
So we wanted to tell the story of the college in a historical context, and Josh Aschenmiller from the history department wrote a fascinating piece about how the world became smaller in 1913, the first year of Fullerton College, what was going on in the world at that time, and how Fullerton was the nexus of change in 1913. So I know we may get caught up in the present and think how incredible these times are, but try to imagine a time when oil and citrus were being delivered by a railway all across America, where people were talking about vitamin C at breakfast for the first time in American history, that you didn't send a case to someone at the holidays. You actually could go to a store and buy oranges and lemons from the Baston Cherry Ranch in Fullerton. Mm-hmm. And the kids that would be the first to go to college came to Fullerton College out of those orchards, out of the oil fields, the stevedores' sons and daughters. And so, I mean, it's a great story about being, again, we are your community college. And so we have to reflect the context. And we thought the stories would give us insight into local history, into state history, national history, and world history as people travel the world, especially when you look at the world wars and young men and young women going overseas and all the experiences that they had and then returned, and some of them didn't return, and what those stories were as well. So we don't want to suggest this is the definitive history of the college. In fact, these are a set of stories, and we want to invite people to tell us their stories. If you go to FullertonLegends.com, you can purchase this book, the proceeds of which will go to the scholarship fund. But we're also inviting you to send me your story. And we want to keep working on it and collecting stories. And some departments will say, hey, how come I'm not in the book? Well, send us your story. Send us your story and you can be in the book, because this is not a finished work, just as life at Fullerton College is not a finished work yet.
Yeah. Where did you get, because I started at the beginning where you talked about the Chapmans and you talked about the Yorbas and the different families. So who were some of the people you had to turn to? Because, I mean, you could go to general history books, but that's just going to give you surface material. I mean, you basically told why the Amridges, when they came in here and they were going to establish why certain families owned 400 acres, they had to sell them, this group came in. Where did you find that information at the beginning when Fullerton College was nothing but a thought?
Well, we had researchers, we had writers, we had videographers, we had photographers, and some of those photographers went into archives, Orange County history records, at local libraries, at the county courthouse. We did interviews with people who connected us with other stories. And you know, the original source material was written by Lewis Plummer, who was the superintendent from 1918 to around 1941-42. And the last assignment he was given was, because he had been let go as superintendent, he had to report to the secretary's desk that used to be his secretary every morning and get a key to a closet that he was assigned to, and basically told to sit there all day long. Lewis Plummer wasn't going to sit there all day long. He wrote the history of the high school and the college. So this is where we started. This is where a lot of the factual information that we would not have experienced ourselves. I didn't come here until 1980. Mm-hmm. And I always sensed when I was reading this the first time was there needs to be the next part of this. And why not incorporate some of the good research that he did about the original classes, the original times, and place that into our picture book. I mean, and what we tried to do was to, you know, make it an illustrated history and to try to cut down on the text as much as we could and to tell as many different stories as we could. Hopefully representative stories from the wide demographic span that represents our student body and has for a long time. So we wanted to tell those stories too.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting, and Bob and I could probably do a 2-hour show to a 5-week show, I mean, honestly, on this book. So we're going to talk just around a little bit I'm going to say right now, you're going to come back because you and I are going to continue this as this grows in different sections, because I could talk 5 hours with Bob on this book. In doing the book and you put it together and we looked at it, there's some things that I looked at, Bob, which I thought was a good aspect. You didn't all make everything strawberries and ice cream in this book. You know, you talked about the Bracero program that came here and helped students, helped families get students into education. You talk about what happened with some of the darker times in society. And so was that part of the aspect that both you and Gary wanted to make sure when you told a story, you just didn't make it sweetheart and apples and everybody goes, oh, what a great story it was, when in reality, history is a story filled with a lot of tears?
Absolutely. And to overlook those stories would have done an injustice to the people involved. Champions of civil rights, people who rose up, Nisei Japanese who were suddenly pulled out of their classes and sent on long journeys to internment camps, who said it never occurred to me that I wasn't anything other than an American citizen, and cherishing a book brought by an English teacher to a railway station signed by all the students in her class to say, we care about you, we're sorry what's happened to you. Lots of different stories to tell. We didn't want to overlook those things. We wanted to include them because they're, you know, James Earl Jones said he studied history not to get angry, but to try to prevent things from happening again. And I think we can all take that lesson and make sure that we're really giving voice to everyone, and maybe rotating opportunities so that everyone gets a fair chance. I know our current president, Dr. Olivo, really stresses how important equity is, and equity meaning everyone should have equal access, everyone should have as close to equal resources as can be provided to really carry out their dreams. And so many of the people in this book took their dreams and did something with them, and the transformative time that they had at the college helped propel some of those things that they were able to do in their lives. We don't take credit for them, but we sure like to claim them, you know, as our own, as Hornets for life. And if I can just tell you one, I think one that really struck me was Cruz Reynoso, who grew up in a migrant workers camp in La Habra, traveled to California with his family to be able to work the fields, had a farm boss tell him it was a waste of his time to go to school. Why was he going to school? Had a mother say, you're reading books all the time. You know, the family needs you to do other things than just read books.
Yeah.
And he was determined, and he went to Fullerton High School, went to Fullerton College, became the student body president, had a passion for civil rights, became an attorney, worked with Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers, became the first Latino Supreme Court Justice. We'll go all the way back to his youngest days, and he realized you could actually work through the system and make things happen. That's how he got letters delivered to their house rather than to a mailbox a half a mile away by writing to the Postmaster General of the United States. So again, I hope some of these stories inspire our current students not to lose hope, not to be pessimistic about the future, but say, you know, I've got to figure out what I can do and do it like Hercules, because he certainly did.
Well, I think the two stories that I sort of like, and I'm going to let you talk about them because you know more of the background, was basically I said I didn't know about that when the Japanese Americans were interned, and if they were in school, they were ripped out of their colleges and everything here in the state of California, and I think it's the state, not federal. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but they were then looked at later in life and said, hey, you should have gotten this degree or that. And you've got a couple stories about ladies in there that you told me when we were off the air that you had the chance and the opportunity to meet them. I just sort of stood back and said, I never know that. I knew about the internment. I never knew about the positive outcome, at least for the educational point of view.
I think Michael Masudo was on our board of trustees at that time, had an aunt who was Nisei Japanese. That in turn opened up for us contacts to more. We reached out, we sent interviewers, two really delightful ladies who appear in this book. We were just so taken with their humility and the absence of bitterness.
Wow.
That they had every right to be bitter and weren't, and were very gracious. We're still hurt, and wounded by that experience, but they went on to do things with their lives that suggested they weren't crippled, or they refused to be labeled as someone that was a victim. And staying in touch with them when I let them know that their panels were appearing in the exhibition, the panels that appear in the book here, they came early. They came an hour early with their families so they could have their pictures taken in front of those panels, because they were proud of their stories, not in a prideful way. They were just proud that we wanted to tell their story. And I think that's what we all enjoy about storytelling, is if somebody does tell a story about it, we hope they get it correct. We hope it's not too inflated with hubris, and that people enjoy it. So that's what we try to do here. And again, I have to credit, I don't want to take credit for the book. I want to acknowledge what a large team of people contributed to this. I just had the enviable position of being the editor on the book, and Gary did marvelous graphic design work that was first inspired by the exhibition, and Needle Incorporated that did that initial design work. So we really, the compilation of this has been a real act of love towards those kind of people.
Well, I think the thing that's fun about the book, too, and this is why when you get an opportunity, especially if you're an alumni here from Fullerton College, you need to get a copy of this book. And remember, it goes to the foundation. Bob Jensen isn't getting rich off of it. Gary's not getting rich off of it. They did it out of the goodness of their heart to help the foundation. You can open it up, and if you've been here long enough, you're going to see people that you know, that maybe you went to school with, that you didn't know certain things about them. And there's also instructors in there. You got Jerry in there, that if you wanted to see Jerry right now, and of course, there's great stories about Jerry. Jerry's family actually lived on the land here at Fullerton College. You and I were talking about that again. Jerry Padilla, who was head of international studies here at Fullerton College, and has been on the air with me more than once in the years at KBPK. And Bob, I know you were good friends with him too through all the years you were here. But I mean, the backstory that Jerry gave you too is this just sort of fun, because he grew up here and yet he went to school here, and then he ended up becoming head of a department here when you look at him.
He's an amazing guy. I watch him now in retirement, encouraging the football players, going to practices, going to games, that he's always been a cheerleader for success. I watched him when he was an instructor here literally pick people up and put them against the wall to chastise them for not working hard enough, or for taking it too easy on something. And I think Jerry's lineage, going back to grandparents who lived on the land that is the college, little secret here I'll share is, Jerry told me that when he dies, he wants his ashes spread across the quad. He knows that's against college regulations, so he's asked his family to stage a diversion somewhere else on campus so someone can quickly run across the campus and spread his ashes. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's a kind of the legends part of this whole piece here. Yeah. And Jerry has so many wonderful stories to share, and if you want to imagine what it looked like on this campus back before it was a campus, go to the west side of the 1000 building and see a ceramic mural done by Marlo Bartels as part of the Centennial. And he took orange crate art and reproduced it. And the view that if you were to look towards the mountains, that is the view from standing right there. And that also happens to be where the red car used to come through campus, where Pat Nixon was dropped off for class as the First Lady of the United States before she was that. So there's some rich, rich history. And if you look around that ceramic art, you'll see medallions that represent bear and creatures and flora, fauna that were native to this city block. So we may have a lot of macadam and concrete around us now, but once it was wilderness, and then it was a farm, and then it became a college.
Is there a part of the book that you sort of look at and say, this is your favorite part of the book? I mean, every person who's attached to a book, there's something that they get drawn to, either words or pictures, in a part of a book like this one is.
I think my favorite section, I just want to draw attention to it again, is what Josh Aschenmiller, professor of history at Fullerton College, wrote about 1913, about what was happening in the world, and the role that Fullerton, this small, emerging city, played in the development of the world, and what was happening all across the world, all of the forces that were rising up that were preaching anarchy, and what was being an anarchy of change, and what was happening in terms of counterbalancing that by civil civil rights and social justice people that were championing a different way of doing it than bloodshed. It's just a fascinating essay. It's early in the book, and it's brilliant. And when I read that, just as when I worked with Jay Goldstein doing the videography, the different artists I got to work with, the curators, the writers, the photographers, they elevated the work that I was intending into something I never knew was possible. So when I read Josh's essay, I said, damn it, I better do some more homework. I better really think carefully in creating this book. It's not just compiling it. It's not just taking the work of others, but it needs to have some gravitas to it too.
Well, I think the thing that's fun, and you brought up J. Seidel, is because I went to the part that dealt with the torch when it first started, what they were going to call it, and of course, the torch itself, when you talk about journalism here, is part of Hornet Media. So I looked at everybody there. Ms. Davies, it was a big part of it at the time, and then I looked at the background of all the different instructors and what they had done. I think every department here at Fullerton College should have, I told Bob earlier, at least a minimum of 10 copies, because if we had this in our department here, Corey Nayland could look at every 145 student and say, you need to go do a report on, and all you have to do is turn to the sports section and start looking at the people you have in there, the teams that you talk about, the records that you have sitting in front of you, and you could end up giving a 5 or 10 minute report. So this isn't just a picture book. This is the history of what people don't tell you. And that's the unfortunate thing about most history, is a lot of people don't tell you things, Bob, and I know this is only part one, but you and all the people that helped you with this tried to make sure that when they talked about a certain section, they got everything correct, not just in their minds, but everybody that was touched might have said, well, I happen to know. And that's the thing that I sort of liked about this, is that I looked at things in there too that I thought I knew and went, I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting. Now I do, about Fullerton College. So, you know, this is the thing where you look at this book, and again, the money goes to the foundation. It's a book that will help support students here on campus. That's the positive side of the book. The fun side of the book is things you learn about Fullerton College, or things you'll look at and start laughing about, because you can look at different sections or different things and start laughing. I mean, you know, you mentioned the old trainer here at Fullerton College. Ryan and I have stories about our old trainer here at Fullerton College, none that we can tell in the air. But you mentioned, Bob, you tried to mention everybody, you and your research group, and tried to put the college itself as a whole in the book. Was that one of the premises that you wanted to do?
Well, you know, I think back to students that would complain they had to take general education. Why do I have to take these classes that are not my major? I said, you need to learn to think like other people. And so we really wanted to have a variety of voices here. And I just want to interrupt your train of thought here to say, this is still an invitation for everyone to tell us their story. If you're not here, tell us your story and send it to me. If you go to FullertonLegends.com, not only can you buy the book, but you can also, you know, it prompts you to send me your story, and we're going to see what we can do with those stories in the future. This is not a static work. This is a dynamic work, and it needs to continue to reflect more stories, more people, more points of view. And we want to do justice to that, we really do. And whoever I pass this off to at some point in my life, I would hope they do the same thing. I love the fact that there's an acknowledgement of mistakes being made, and we learn from our mistakes and we get better by them. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't have to repeat mistakes at all. And I marvel at just the wonderful people that have come through here, and an instructor just passed away in his 90s, and he described, because kids are knuckleheads, let's not forget that. I'm still a knucklehead, mm-hmm. but he described the streaking that occurred one night. It wasn't quite sure what was going on. There were naked people up on top of the old student union. There were naked people running across the quad. He said, what's this? And then he found out the next day in the paper, that's streaking. It was happening all across America. Or to see people climb up on the Hornet sculpture. Being knuckleheads, putting a bicycle up on top of it, mm-hmm. as if, you know, somehow that was their personal statement. So I hope we caught a sense of humor here, not just gravitas. And I hope students understand it's okay to be a knucklehead.
It's funny that you said that, because I'm going through the book and I'm seeing pictures that remind me of days. And of course, he talks about a knucklehead. Michael Kelly, who I went to school with here in the theater department, always used to tease us that he lived in a bike locker. And Michael ended up making a small little movie about living in a bike locker, where it opens up with him crawling in the bike locker, and then it opens up into a giant mansion. And you remember those people, Bob. That's what this does to it. Makes you remember where you were. How did I get to where I am today? Who helped me along the way? Not just instructors, but that student, that fellow student that I went to school with, that looked at me and said, hey man, it's not that bad. Things are okay. You know what? Hey, you're pretty good at what you do. That they gave you the words of encouragement. And that's the thing, when I looked at the book, I went, it brings back all the memories. The good ones, the bad ones, the ones that you said, why didn't I do more? But that's what books should be about. That's what history, and I like the fact that you keep talking about the dark side of things, because yeah, I'm like you. At my old age, a lot of things that go on today, Bob, I will tell all the young people. I really did think, because if everybody went back to our college years, they probably wouldn't let us on the air right now if they knew what we did. But I don't know about you, but I thought that when I would be the age I am right now, a lot of the things that you and I look at that we despised when we were 18 and 19 years old would no longer be happening. And that's the thing that I appreciated in the book too, because it made me look at history that you showed me back in the 40s, and I realized that's still going on today.
Yeah.
So with a book like this, you can go back and think your college years were, or everybody's college years were peaches and cream, and then you get a book like Bob and Gary put together, that they show you the reality of the world through all the decades that you've gotten there, and realize, yeah, there was a lot of joy. I mean, we could look at the championships and the sporting aspect of it. We can look at what journalism did through the years in the book here, and other departments. We can look at the cheerleaders and all the smiles that are in that book. And yet we can read little snippets, which I told you, that's the thing I liked the best, was I would read this and then there'd be a snippet to the left. That's my technical term. And it would tell me more about this, or it would set the time for this. And then I'd realize that was going on while we're talking about this. That's the one thing in this book. This, to me, is an incredible history book.
Thank you.
It's in depth in a way that, Bob, it makes the reader get to fill in part of the blanks, because if you look at the certain years that you knew you were alive, if you lived in Orange County, you can look at what you're talking about and say, I was there then. I didn't know that was going on. And I think that's the most fascinating thing in history, that you realize what went on in your life and you thought your life was perfect, and yet everything around you was not. That gets introduced. There's a lot of great times in this book. I need Bob and I talk about a couple dark things, and everybody's going, oh, what a depressing.
Yeah,
there is more joy in this book. Bob, there's got to be one story in there that we can tell before we stop for the day that's got to be joyous.
Well, I have to think about sort of joy and tragedy. Joy in tragedy.
Okay.
And that was Tommy Thompson, who was a local fire inspector, was actually the bus driver for the football team. And we hear a lot about how students would wait on campus for the bus to return because they wanted to know where the party was that night. Now, Tommy didn't talk about that. What Tommy talked about instead was holding the bus once because the quarterback, the Fullerton College quarterback, was sobbing by himself because he felt he was responsible for their loss in a very important championship game. He hit the ground a few yards away from the touchdown and the game was over. And Tommy Thompson describes how Coach Sherbeck went out to him one-on-one and affirmed him to say, you know, who are you? And he said, I'm a loser. And he said, no, you're not. You're the quarterback of the Fullerton College football team. Nobody else gets to be that. So you stand up right now, young man, and let's get back on this bus together. you know. And then Coach, as we've heard from lots of other alums, would turn to people and tell them that he loved them or show them his love for them. And so I think there's a part of this story that a good teacher can see things in students and encourage them, see things perhaps the students don't see, and help pick them up or share a tragic moment, a sad moment, a defeated moment. There are lots of those kind of stories, and I don't pretend to have captured all of them here, but I'll hear about in relationship what teachers and students were able to achieve together and get over the hurdles of life that so frequently are there for us. So I think that's the story I think about. Here's a bus driver capturing a moment, just a moment, a glimmer, and saw the character of a man emerge in how he treated a boy who thought he was not a man, and he was affirmed to be a man. And
I do want to bring up and let you tell everybody, because I keep mentioning the foundation, and that the profits from this book will go to the foundation. I'm sure there's people that are watching us and will be watching us many times on this saying, what is the foundation? What does it do? Why does it exist? Why do you keep asking me to buy this book? Because the money will go to the foundation. Who's it going to help, and how's it going to help them?
All right, well, fair question. So the Friends of Fullerton College Foundation is the successor organization to the old Fullerton College Foundation. So Friends of Fullerton College Foundation. And we award scholarships, 75 endowed scholarships. There are also organizations that bring money in once a year to us to be able to give students scholarships. So that amount fluctuates and grows every year. We're trying to grow the scholarship fund. And as our board grows, as our energies expand, then we hope to do more for the college beyond scholarships. But right now, scholarships, emergency funds, that's where we want to be. We want to meet students at their most serious need and help them. That's what it's about. It's a tax-deductible donation that one can make. Buying the book, of course, we have to subtract the value of the book, but if you make any donations, or if you made a $250 donation, then it's a free book to you. All of that money will go to students, and that's why I'm involved in my retirement years, why I want to be a part of this. Is we don't know all the backstories. We don't know all that is happening to the students, how hard it is for them to come to school any given day. We know there are homeless. We know there are food-challenged people as well, and so we want to take that food insecurity or those homeless situations and try to help them. And for other students, it's to recognize them with scholarships for high achievement, to help them transfer to a university or professional training program, or to embark on their careers. You think of all the different ways that Fullerton College does that. The foundation wants to be a part of helping students get to the next place in their life. So that's why I'm a part of the Friends of Fullerton College Foundation.
You know, when we look at this, Bob's already said it's a continuous story, and you brought it up more than once. Like Bob said, go to the homepage. He'll let you know what it is in just a second. Again, tell your story, or a story about the college, or a story about the professor that you had, be it a man or a woman that helped you get to be who you are today. I mean, you talked about the Reynosos, and we have a building named after him out there. We met, Ryan and I were lucky enough to meet the entire family, because Ryan from Hornet Media filmed the whole thing for the college. And we got to hear all the stories from the brothers and the sisters in the family too. But if you're somebody like that who has a story about somebody who went here, and you know they wouldn't mind you telling it, you know, make sure you contact Bob or Gary and say, hey, I don't know if you knew this, but this happened on. When you look at this, Bob, it's what, 160 pages, the book. Mm-hmm. It's what it is. It's one of those books that you take your time flipping through. I've done it a couple times where I go and then I go back, and you know, you look at the pictures that are in here, Bob. You know what I thought was very interesting too, when you talked about just the words. I went and looked at all the pictures that you had in this book, the different characters that you talked about when I went through this book, and then the clubs here at Fullerton College. I mean, Bob just turned to a page where it's the kayak club. I mean, I'm thinking, where did they go? Where were the rivers that you could do nowadays when you
So
think
they would go to Newport Beach. That's where they would test them out. But to be a member of the kayak club, you had to build your own kayak. So when the big flood in 1938 came, they were out in their kayaks while everyone else was trying to figure out how they're going to navigate 4 feet of water in downtown Fullerton. And at that point, Leo Fender was the only business owner to get to his store because he was a member of the kayak club in his youth, still had the kayak in his garage, and he took that down to save as much electronics as he could from the rain of 1938. Now, the kayak club doesn't exist anymore, but there are so many stories about groups of people, whether it was the Prospectors Club in geology, who kind of found a common interest, and they stayed together that transcended just their time at Fullerton College. It remained, even after their professor died, they still got together every year for it. So there's a lot of sense of connection of teams of people that remained friends for life. And I mean, I enjoy my relationship with theater students and music students and art students. And through the Centennial, so many people I met, and so many people that reached out to me and said, I was a foreign exchange student in 1950. Let me tell you what it was like coming from Norway. Or a grandson saying, I got to tell you about my granddad and what he taught me. And I think that's why we love stories, is to kind of entertain each other, inspire each other, remind each other maybe that we're not as important as we think we are, or to remind us that something's possible that we didn't think was possible because somebody else just showed us how to do it.
And the thing is with this book too is, you know, people hear Bob and I talking about history, but Bob, I mean, you go as far as into the present as you could have gotten to too, because I saw things about the engineering club, and of course we know they won a NASA award for what they did. You talked about Jay's drone program here, who is now going to be a bachelor's program here at Fullerton College. So it's not just the past of Fullerton College. And the way people, when you say the past, people think you're talking about 30 years ago all the time.
Yeah, no, and we want, I mean, look how beautiful the campus is in this aerial photograph of it. I mean, a tremendous amount of money has been spent in upgrading these facilities with a beautiful Spanish Moorish architectural homage to the original WPA buildings from the 1930s. But it's not about the buildings, it's all the exciting things that happen inside the buildings.
Yeah.
And, you know, being in a studio right now is just a reminder of there are so many little beehives of activity all across the campus, you know, to use the hornet metaphor for a moment. And you know, we just want to celebrate the diversity of the campus in age, in cultural backgrounds, in religions, in interests. We are your community college. That's what we want to say to people. Fullerton College, it's your community college. When during World War I happened, and all of a sudden all the men were gone from all the community colleges that had just been birthed in California a few years before. And in fact, Anaheim came to Fullerton and said, you know, we'd kind of like to move Fullerton College to Anaheim, because we have a bigger city and because, you know, you have so few students there right now. And the city rose up and said, no, this is our community college. You're welcome to send your students to us, but no, it's going to be here. And other ones like Hollywood College failed, you know, that went out of business because there were no students anymore. And somehow Fullerton College was able to glue together a way of continuing to operate. And who cares which was the first one or the second one or the most continuously running or any of those things. All we want to say is good people came here, did good work, discovered themselves, and went on and lived lives of value and significance. And look back with fondness about the time that they had here. That's what we hope happened. And if it wasn't a good time, come back and tell us that. You know, we made mistakes, we want to hear about that. And we want to make sure that the next generation of students don't experience what you experienced. And I think the last thing I'll say is Rosie Espinosa, who's about to be the mayor of La Habra again, Rosie's Garage, recognized by President Clinton as an amazing community service-minded lady. She brings her after-school children to Fullerton College's campus and says, this is what a college looks like. This is where Rosie went to college. I want you to be thinking about going to college one day. And that's what we want to hear. We've seen the Kindercaminata kids come to the campus. It doesn't have to be Fullerton College. Just advance your education in the place that's the best place of connection for you.
Well, we're going to do more of these interviews together. about this book. Bob, once again, make sure everybody knows where they can find this book, what they need to do to get this book. Besides, when I talk to the president of the college tomorrow, I'm going to remind her that each department needs a minimum of 10 of these books tomorrow here on Hornet Radio. But let everybody know how they can get Legends and Legacies.
Go to fullertonlegends.com. You can order the book there, and you can send your story to me from there if you'd like to. fullertonlegends.com.
So this is part one of the book. This is part one of our interview, because every time Bob updates this book, I'm going to make sure Bob and I get together. I know that Ryan and Joe are always going to be very kind to us to walk in the studio. So we're going to continue this story down the road, why this book continues to grow, and make sure, I know it's not just the holiday season I want you to get this book. This book could be important to anybody who goes here, to any community college, in history in general. I'm a history freak. I've got one copy on my computer. I'm going to end up getting another copy, and I'm going to give it to my nephew down in San Diego, my grandnephew, because he knows his Uncle Mark, crazy Uncle Mark, loves history, and he needs to know things about this. Bob, thanks for spending time with me.
Thank you, Mark.
Always.
Thank you.
You know, thank Gary for what he did in the book, and all your other volunteers that made this special, heartfelt, and beautiful. And to sum it up, Bob, once a Hornet,
always
a Hornet. Thank you for watching us here on Hornet Radio, associated with Hornet Media. Bob Jensen and the old guy. Tell you right now, get Legends and Legacies.